This is Michael Popok, and it's time for Legal AF After Dark. Judge Maran is about to throw the book at Donald Trump. He's got a lot of things in his arsenal to handle the contempt of court that Donald Trump has exhibited more than a dozen times in how he's violated the gag order. Does he establish a monitor? Does he make all of Donald Trump's social media go through a special master or monitor for approval? Does he fine him? Does he jail Donald Trump? Well, we talk about it and analyze it on Legal AF, the podcast. Take a listen.
The analysis on the criminal trial in Manhattan against Donald Trump. And I'm not going to spend that much time talking about how Donald Trump whines every single day and he says how cold he is and he falls asleep. And it's just a whole kind of bizarre, just very, very bizarre. But in some of these press conferences and some of his posts, although the posts have although they've been, fairly inflammatory in the past few days, I don't know in the past few days if they've run afoul of the gag order, but they certainly were at the outset of this trial. The district attorney brought an immediate application for contempt. There was a hearing that was held, right away. And then the district attorney brought another application earlier in the week as well for more statements that Donald Trump had made at the end of the previous week, including saying that the jury was unfair. It's 95% Democrat, which isn't even true. And so there's another hearing that's going to be taking place on this Thursday on that. But Justice Maran hasn't yet ruled on the first application for contempt. Popok, do you think he's doing that to kind of just hold this over Trump's head? And as Trump has not yet violated it again recently, it's kind of a carrot stick approach, waiting to see what may happen for the next hearing on Thursday. What do you make of it? Does this, I see some people saying, look, why do you have gag orders if a judge isn't going to, enforce it? Does this make Justice Maran look weak that he hasn't immediately issued these sanctions against Trump? But Trump does appear, granted, while he's sleeping in court and whatever, he's not treating this court proceeding like he did with Engoron or even with Judge Kaplan. And so there is a little bit of that going on. So what do you make of that?
I have a slightly different take on it, although I think we come to the same place when it comes to Maran. To answer your initial question, judges don't have to act immediately. It's the prerogative of a judge. And they're like a crocodile. It looks like they're sleeping, but if you get too close to them, you lose your leg. And with judges, they just let all the bad acts accumulate. And when they get around to it, and he'll get around to it within a week or two after the initial motion was filed, he'll then, and he'll have Donald Trump. He issued an order to show cause to require Donald Trump to make sure he's in the courtroom. They were going to do it on Wednesday, the dark day, but then Donald Trump complained about that. So the judge moved it to another day, although you wouldn't know it to listen to Donald Trump. He wants Donald Trump in the courtroom because he's going to be sanctioning Donald Trump. There's no other way to put it. The fact that it's a week or two after some of these events happen, I think a judge like Judge Maran, who's been on the bench for a long time, who's seasoned, veteran, sophisticated, unlike, let's say, Judge McAfee down in Georgia has been on the bench for a year. Judge Cannon down in Florida, been on the bench a year and a half. This judge knows what he's doing. A judge will give you as much rope as necessary for you to hang yourself, and then the judge will hang you. And so that's what he did. I mean, I think there were two things. He's either going to see Donald Trump continue to demonstrate a lack of self-restraint and a lack of contemptuous or contumacious conduct in violation of the gag order that'll be used against him, or, as you said, it'll be a carrot to hang over his head during this period. Although the reason I say I disagree with you a bit, I don't think he's been on his best behavior. The interview that he gave that you ran a clip on during one of your hot takes just happened this week. The prosecutors jumping up and down on Thursday about 6 more or 5 more violations on top of the original 7 or 8. We're now up to 12 or 13 violations. And just to put this in perspective for our audience, I've never had a client or myself be found in contempt ever in 33 years, let alone 12 different examples of clear violations. And the prosecutors are doing what they need to do. They're saying Donald Trump Everything you've told him he can't do, he continues to do. And the good news about that is in the hearing over this, we already had one hearing about this. That's where Todd Blanche lost whatever was left of his shred of credibility with the judge, went out the window because the judge told him, "You've lost all credibility with me in the arguments that you're making." It's not. Karen, I think midweek said, "Well, they were just making arguments in zealous advocacy of their client." I think it went beyond that. And the judge was like, "No, now you've lost me." And that version is of losing credibility with the trier of fact, the judge, the jury, is going on. It's something we haven't talked about. It's the little love language. It's the little decoding and coding that's going on in the courtroom. Juries watch everything in a trial: how you button your jacket, how the defendant wipes his brow, what tie he's wearing, smirks on their face, disrespect for the judge, the jury, eye rolling, smiling. And Donald Trump, of course, is not properly trained, doesn't want to be trained on how to operate in a courtroom, and neither are his lawyers. And so they have we talked about what the testimony was in the first part of this segment on the trial, but we didn't talk about the impact on the jury of the, I'll split it up this way: hard skills and soft skills. Hard skills for me in this example is the information coming out, testimonial and documentary. That's the evidence. Soft skills that are going on in there, soft issues, are how the jury feels they're being treated or mistreated, the eye rolling, the laughing. When Donald Trump smiles at Rana and frowns at or doesn't have a facial expression for David Pecker, or scoffs, or tries to fake sleep or real sleep, whatever he's doing, the jury's watching, and they're making their own conclusions about what an a-hole, but that's a legal term, that Donald Trump is acting like in the courtroom. And they can smell a fraud and inauthenticity a mile away, right? It's like it's talk about odors in the room, or let this thing come to odor, or whatever you said before, one of your hot takes. They are watching this. This is another thing that's going on there. For the judge, he's going to sanction him. The question is, does he start progressively with $1,000 a day for in the past and then in the future, and then warn him one more time that I got one last thing left in my arsenal, Mr. Trump, Mr. Defendant, and that is putting you in jail for hours or days to make you stop. And even though Donald Trump, some of his followers are like, "Do it, that'll make him more of a martyr," the reporting out there is Donald Trump is very, very worried about pushing this too far and ending up in some sort of jumpsuit. And they don't want that to happen. But all this other stuff, Ben, and we'll report on what happens with this double contempt thing next week when it happens. But all this stuff where, and you guys are doing on Meidas, are doing a great job reporting on it. Donald Trump staring and glaring at reporters and Maggie Haberman and this one and that one. It's not lost on the jury. I mean, unless the jury's out of the room at that moment. But they are watching everything that's happening in that room. And they're also watching, I'll leave it on this, they're also watching all of the checks that the defense are writing that they'll never be able to cash in a case about cash checks, about promises that they're making about the evidence that's not consistent with the evidence that's coming into the record. I'll leave you with one example. Blanche said in his opening, which was 20 minutes long, I guess if you got nothing good to say, don't say anything that long. He said that the National Enquirer he basically suggested it was a legitimate news organization that made journalistic decisions like the New York Times or something else. Cut right to that same day, David Pecker saying, we practice checkbook journalism. We'll publish anything. We buy stories, and we only ran all these stories because Donald Trump wanted us to help him with the campaign. The jury's got to be eye rolling, at least in their minds, about the promises that were made and what really happened. And I thought it was remarkable that he knowing that Pecker was going to be the first witness, that Todd Blanche did very little, almost nothing to go after Pecker in advance of his testimony.
I thought, and I can say this now because the cross is over on Pecker, so I would hate to ever be blamed of like giving them guidance on how they should have done the cross on Pecker. I thought it was an absolute disaster on cross. I mean, you should have showed Pecker all of his articles about aliens are real. You should have showed him Bigfoot is alive, and you should have made him look like, look, you just publish the stupidest stuff anyway. Like, you're not even a real serious person. Like you're a clown. That's how I would have done the cross. And I specifically did not give that hot take because I did not want to give that guidance.
But he couldn't do it, Ben, because he said in his opening, I agree with you, but then you have to do that in your opening. Instead, They said they were a legitimate news organization.
And that's, to me, where I think they made a massive defense blunder. And I'm not one to ever try to give them the strategy. I'm often asked, like, what would you do if you were representing him? I'm like, I'd never represent him, number one. And number two, I'm not going to give him any guidance or strategy. But after they screwed it up, I'm happy to explain how they screwed it up. And it's something that they can't clean up at this point. Otherwise, they'd even lose more credibility if they now pivoted and changed their whole defense theory. Andrew Weissman talked about some potential options that Justice Merchan has on this gag order issue, in addition to obviously fining Donald Trump or throwing him into jail right away. And there's one that's fairly close by to the courtroom. It's like right down the hall, as KFA described it to us. You could put a monitor over his use of social media posts. You can hold the sentence on a contempt finding until after the trial. You can advise Trump that his contempt of gag order can be considered at sentencing upon conviction to add to his prison term in addition to the other options. I thought that list there is interesting as well, and I hadn't heard that really being talked about in other in other places other than Weissman's analysis. So I thought it was worthy of sharing.
Welcome back. Well, that's an example of what we do twice a week, Wednesdays and Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. You know where, right here on this MeidasTouch YouTube channel. Free subscribe, help them get to 3 million. I never thought I'd say that number out loud. 3 million free subscribers before November the 5th. And then you also can go on our YouTube channel and you'll find all of our Legal AF podcasts listed there. And you can come over and after watching us and listen on audio podcast platforms of your choice. If you know all about Legal AF, you're already part of our audience. We really do appreciate it. Otherwise, it'd just be Karen, Ben, and me just talking to ourselves twice a week, which is not that interesting of a show. But we really appreciate you being part of it. But be part of our marketing department. We need one of those. Take the clip, send it off to friends and family and say, hey, Legal AF, that show I really like, here's a clip, and maybe they'll make that 10-minute investment and then join our audience. But if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm Michael Popak. That was Legal AF, and we invite you to join our audience Wednesdays and Saturdays, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And then on hot takes just like this one at the intersection of law and politics, about every hour on the MeidasTouch Network. So until my next hot take, until my next Legal AF, this is Michael Popak reporting. Heary, heary, Legal AF Law Breakdown is now in session. Go beyond the headlines and get a deep dive into the important legal concepts you need to know and we discuss every day on Legal AF. Exclusive content you won't find anywhere else, all for the price of a couple of cups of coffee. Join us at patreon.com/legalaf. That's patreon.com/legalaf.